You know what's amazing? When we launched Shortlister on October 7th, we had no idea what to expect. Now, just 2 months later, we're at 2,000 subscribers strong with almost 80,000 views across our content. We've shared hundreds of job opportunities directly with top candidates, and I've even heard from quite a few people who've landed roles through our community, which is just incredible. And all of this is because of you reading and sharing our stuff and just being part of the Shortlister community. So thank you. And speaking of thank yous, I want to acknowledge the sponsors who help make these conversations possible. Support for this episode comes from First Citizens. You know this bank because they've been around for 30 plus years and they've helped a lot of people. But First Citizens is also a great place to work. It's not just another bank pushing product. They're actually all about investing in their employees, creating a place where you can genuinely build a career and feel like you're part of something bigger. Talking to people I know who work there, First Citizens is the kind of employer that cares about your growth both professionally and personally. And right now, they're making this Christmas even more special with their More the Merrier loan sale. We're talking up to 100% financing, no payments for 3 months, plus cashback options. And here's the exciting part. You could win a brand new hybrid SUV. Just visit firstcitizensgroup.com to learn more about this amazing offer. Support for this episode comes from Answer Motors. The Proton X50 has arrived at Answer Motors and it's redefining what to expect in a modern SUV. Picture this, a turbocharged engine with impressive power paired with technology that makes every drive smarter and safer. We're talking intelligent cruise control, automatic emergency braking, and a 360-degree camera system that takes the stress out of parking. The 10-inch display isn't just for show either. It's your command center for everything from navigation to entertainment. And right now, Answer Motors has a Christmas special that makes the Proton X50 an even more compelling choice. Whether you're looking for performance, technology, or value, this SUV delivers on all fronts. Experience the Proton X50 for yourself. Visit Answer Motors or head to protontt.com to book your test drive today. You know how keeping up with healthcare can feel like a juggling act, right? Between managing appointments, prescriptions, and getting the right advice, it's a lot. That's where Selma Flex comes in. It's not just for patients, but for doctors too. For patients, imagine having all your health info in one place right on your phone. Need to book an appointment? Done. Got a question for your doctor? Shoot them a message. It's like having a personal healthcare assistant available anytime you need it. No more waiting on hold or stressing about missing a checkup. And for doctors, Selma Flex is a powerhouse tool that streamlines your practice. You can manage patient records, appointments, and even consults all in one place. It's about making healthcare seamless on both ends. So whether you're a patient looking to take control of your health or a doctor wanting to make your practice more efficient, Selma Flex is where it's at. Learn more about Selma Flex at selmaflex.com and see how it can transform the way you handle healthcare. Selma Flex. Better help, better health. And support for this episode comes from Standard Distributors. You know that feeling when you walk into your home and everything just clicks? Like it finally feels like you? That's what Standard Distributors is all about, helping you make your space reflect who you are. So whether you're thinking about a sleek LG side-by-side refrigerator for your kitchen or a Samsung soundbar to level up movie nights, they've got what you need. And this Christmas, Standard is making it easier than ever to upgrade your life. We're talking stylish furniture, modern appliances, and even professional interior design services to transform your space. And you'll find unbeatable prices across the entire range. The best part? You can shop everything from the comfort of your home at standardtt.com with easy delivery and expert installation included. So if you're ready to give your home that glow up you've been dreaming about, visit standardtt.com. It's the perfect time to upgrade your life. My guest today is Irwin Williams, Head of Software Development at iGovTT, which is the national ICT company of Trinidad and Tobago, where he leads software services and solutions for the government. Now, before joining iGovTT, Irwin spent nearly 5 years as Chief Software Engineer at Telio Systems Limited, a company I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. Irwin has been a pivotal figure in Trinidad's software development landscape, having led stuff like the Telio's Code Jam, a national software development advocacy program that impacted hundreds of students. In fact, I think that's where I first encountered Irwin. He's also taught at both the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago. What makes Irwin particularly interesting is his deep commitment to both the technical and human sides of software development. He's not just focused on writing code, he's passionate about building teams and fostering innovation and creating opportunities for developers in Trinidad and Tobago and beyond. His experience spans from developing cloud solutions and mobile applications to championing digital transformation initiatives and mentoring emerging talent. Now, in this episode, we discuss the state of software development in Trinidad and Tobago today, the opportunities and challenges for developers in the region, and how both established companies and newcomers can thrive in this evolving landscape. We also explore his thoughts on education, career paths, and the impact of emerging technologies like AI on the future of software development. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow the show on your favorite podcasting app. And even more important, head over to shortlister.co, that's shortlisthr.co, and subscribe to the newsletter. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes, and it helps the podcast tremendously. With that, I bring you Irwin Williams. Irwin, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. Let's dive in, maybe by starting with a look at your current role as head of software development at iGovTT.
Sure.
Were you headhunted for this role?
I don't know. I heard about the role because my current boss was looking for candidates. Maybe he's never said to me, but maybe that was his strategy of softly headhunting by telling me I'm looking for this and who do you know? And I was very game to give him candidates. But when he sat and described how iGov was changing, what they were trying to do, I was like, this sounds very cool.
Right. What was that like? What were they trying to do?
So this was at a breakfast chat, nothing particularly formal. But he kind of outlined, listen, we've built software before. iGov would have built this thing called the Road to Recovery app, so citizens could have submitted ideas. They built a few other things, but they were looking to, one, support the broader goals of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, which would involve supporting the growth of software in the government and the use of software in the government, as well as position iGov as a company that builds high-quality things, digital solutions, and of which software is part of it. Me coming from where I was before, that was very attractive. The idea of very pointedly supporting national development felt like a good time to do it. I've been writing about that for a while on my own blog, not from a complainy kind of a way, but from a, we could do this. Here's what I have done as a POC, a proof of concept, a POC, and it just felt good.
So let's zoom out a bit. Mm-hmm. What exactly is iGov? How do you describe iGov to someone who hasn't heard about the organization before?
So iGovTT is actually the short name, is the name you say if you're trying to say it quickly.
Okay.
The longer name is the National ICT Company of Trinidad and Tobago. ICT, of course, standing for Information and Communication Technology. That company was built with the mandate to support the needs of the public service and digital transformation and digital needs. That could be networking, it could be security, it could be storage, along with very custom line of business things. A ministry might want some workflow to be optimized or to be digitized. They might want a new way of handling customer engagement. And so iGov traditionally would have handled ministries. But more and more we're open to anything you need in Trinidad and Tobago, we're willing to support and even beyond that.
So iGov is serving the public sector?
Yes.
Its clientele is drawn from the public sector?
Traditionally, yes. Ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs as we refer to them.
Right. Let's go back to your interview. What was the interview process like for this job?
So it was just one interview. After I met with my current boss, his name is Charles Bob Semple. After I met with him for that breakfast, he said, well, listen, when the role opens up, if you're interested, you can apply. But he was also looking for other interested candidates. It eventually got advertised on the Employee TT platform that iGov incidentally also created. And when I applied, they confirmed I was a decent candidate. The interview was kind of normal. It was competency-based, which means they were focused on what I did over the course of my career and drove the direction of the questions in that space. We had someone from the Ministry of Digital Transformation, someone from the iGov board, my boss, and someone from not iGov, like an external party.
Did you have to do practical coding, anything at the time?
No, and I would have been surprised if I needed to. For a role like this, I was interviewing for the head of software. So that's more managerial, more leadership oriented. You're not expected really to write code. You should have known some degree of code. And I think the way the panel was arranged was meant to kind of figure that out, if you could handle it. But really, you are part of what drives the goals of the company forward from a people perspective as opposed to from a technology, I write the solutions perspective.
Oh, understood. So before we dive into the role itself, how big is iGov? How big is the organization in terms of headcount?
I think there are 140 of us in iGovTT, so not a small, well, maybe by global means a small, but in Trinidad, it's not micro. It's big enough to do some good work. It's very diverse as well. So my team is the software team. There's an operations team. So we'll go into that later, but once we build solutions, it's handled by the operations team in iGov. There's a consulting team. So it's an interesting flow. Consulting brings solutions to software delivers to operations, and they send it to the public. Beyond that, you have procurement, you have communications, you have all that you need to run really an enterprise, really, which is what iGov is.
And what is the culture like? Is it one of those organizations where you're in meetings all day? Are people working remotely? Is it a setup where you have individual contributors who are, for the most part, working independently? What is the culture like?
So my CEO is Dr. Injan Miajan. And one of the things he emphasizes a lot is communication. Communication. And then on top of that, he adds respect. So it's not just say what you want and hurt people's feelings. That's not your goal. Your goal is really to understand each other and to build together. And I think iGov's culture captures that really well. Because I was essentially originating the software team, I got to seed the culture of my team with those attributes along with some others as well. So iGov, when I started, I mean, from the HR team, everybody was very welcoming. They were like, we're happy to have you. You're joining this movement. It could be challenging. I said this before in other spaces, and I'll say it again. They work so hard to deliver what we need to deliver and make sure we aren't hacked, for example, to make sure we aren't compromised, to make sure that the people we serve have a good time with our solutions. You often have to go above and beyond the call of duty. And I see it from my peers and my colleagues in iGov.
So tell me about your role specifically, right? What does your job entail as head of software development?
Right. So our goal is to build software for iGov to meet iGov's needs, generally for iGov's clients. In other words, though we can build solutions to run internally, for the most part, we're building solutions for a ministry, department, or agency. We are building websites, building applications. So, for example, let me distinguish that. You might think of a website as a www.igovtt.tt. We could do that, and we have done that. There's a very new version of that right now that my team was very involved with. But we lean more towards applications. So when people hear apps, they think of things running on your phone, which we've done before, but also like web applications. So it might be a workflow that helps you submit an application for some kind of certificate. We just launched one related to cybersecurity. So you submit your documents on a portal we created. We allow our team to participate in that, give you feedback, send you notifications, and then that produces an actual digital certificate. We build that out and we build systems like that. So essentially we focus on if you have a business process that you need to digitize or improve, we can do that and allow you to leverage all the benefits of modern systems, including using things like AI.
How big is your team?
We have 8 developers. We just hired our first UX team lead. UX is user experience, sorry. We're hiring for QA as well. And soon after that, we'll hire for data, as in data engineering.
Right. So you are the guy who is synthesizing all of these skills for a particular project.
Sure.
With a view to delivering an end result on schedule.
Yep.
Within budget.
Yeah.
Is that part of the role that you're thinking about budgets, you're thinking about skills?
So typically a customer like a ministry may come to us saying, we want to get such done. And the consulting team, which is not my team, it's a team we work with, the unit, they would have their team members negotiate. And negotiate is not a money thing. It's let's go through the process together to understand what you need. That'll result in some kind of a cost proposed to them. And once they approve it, then it goes from a set of requirements. And so if you're in software, you know about requirements gathering and understanding the customer's needs, and maybe you know about user stories. Whatever that language is, they communicate it to us and then we begin to build. But the building isn't, we go off and build and never talk to them. It's very collaborative.
Right. We
back and forth. Is this what they meant? Let's have a meeting with them. Let's understand it. So to answer the question about meetings all day, not really, because the team is using collaborative experiences, meeting remotely, meeting in person, whiteboarding it, designing, and then going off to build. Once we build, it goes through the QA process to make sure that, well, we're meeting the customer's needs. But not just that even when we build software, sometimes you build software that works well, but you haven't considered all the security needs to it. And so we have security reviews as well to reduce the risk of being hacked. And once that's done, we're off to production.
Can you give me an example of that very process applied to maybe a recent project that you either completed or worked
Fair
on?
enough. So like I mentioned, we just launched CETA. So if you go to iGov social media pages, myself and Dr. Majan have done a couple interviews already about this thing called CETA. CETA stands for the Cyber Security Investment Tax Allowance. And so we launched the management system for that. Minister of Finance said, listen, businesses in Trinidad and Tobago can receive a tax rebate. There's a tax allowance really of up to $500,000
Right.
for investment in cybersecurity. And he said, iGovTT will certify or validate your purchases. So it's not just I've spent money and I send it to the Inland Revenue Division. iGov will then provide whatever validation that the thing you said the cybersecurity purchases really is that. In the past, maybe people would have printed out a bunch of receipts. They may have come with documents and supporting stuff justifying it. Paper, dropped it off in some office.
Right.
And then it would be in somebody's inbox and they'd process it physically. Maybe then go get some supporting stuff and add it to it. If they had questions, they would call.
Right.
We built a virtual platform to support all of that. So you log into this portal, you describe your business, you go ahead and add whatever documents related to cybersecurity, whether purchases or receipts or whatever. And my team, well, not my team, the iGov team, whoever's assigned, would review that particular submission. Once it's fine, it's approved by both the deputy CEO and the CEO. It results in a digital certificate that then can be passed on to IRD.
This is within an app.
It's a web application.
It's a web application.
Yeah, so you go online and do everything online.
Okay. And therefore you're saving time and you're providing a way of authenticating all of these purchases.
Yes.
All right. What's the tech stack at iGovTT? And I suppose I want to understand a bit of like the environment. What tools are you using every day?
Oh, that's a good question. So when we have virtual meetings, a lot of times they're done via Microsoft Teams.
Right.
So we meet via Teams. When we are building software, building solutions, we do something like Microsoft Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. Depending on the developers, their level of expertise, they may choose to use PHP or some platform like that. Some of my developers are more C# oriented, so they use Microsoft.NET Framework. If we're doing machine learning type things, for example, my team lead, Kern, he often has these demonstrations using Python and other data science friendly platforms. So we're not kind of tied to one or the other. We kind of use whatever makes sense for the moment.
I heard C# and Python and a number of other things there. What would you say are the set of, I suppose, credentials or languages you have to know or master to be part of the iGovTT environment?
That's a really good question. If I'm interviewing a developer, I don't really start with what languages are you great at. I kind of start with what have you done? Oh, well, I built this mobile app for this person. Or I built this game. Or I built a web application that served thousands of people. That kind of makes me curious as to how you think about building. Whether you choose to build with C# or Node, which is JavaScript, or PHP, becomes kind of secondary. Because honestly, languages kind of come and go. The most popular language this year wasn't popular 5 years ago. And so what you started in your school, let's say you did Java in university, you might come out to find people have moved on to Kotlin or moved on to something that wasn't even around 5 years ago, and that's fine. Your experience with building, experience with architecting a solution is what really grabs us and allows us to validate you know the rigors of building. Because whatever language you pick, whatever framework you pick, you have to go through the same pathway of frustration, realizing the compiler can only go so far. It really needs your expertise for crafting.
Right. Well, that's a good, I suppose, segue into this issue of portfolio.
Yeah.
And the importance of what is the value of a portfolio for a career in software development.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
When I started off, in my mind, you needed to have a degree. So your portfolio meant what were your credentials. Even today, I think people are still told when you're starting off in software, you need to get Network Plus and A+, and now maybe some kind of Cisco certification, then get your degree or go to some kind of a boot camp, and the paper guides you. But even back then, I was really blessed because while doing my undergrad degree, I got to start the portfolio building early. Building an app for the student advisory services, building an app for the library meant my conversation about software didn't start with, oh, I have a degree. It started with, well, I built this thing for the library, and here's how I connected it to the database, and here's how I confirmed my use of algorithms or whatever. And so similarly, portfolios have become much more important because it separates you and shows us, the people involved in hiring, that you know what you're talking about. So whether it is you start off with some open source project, a big one, or you contributed to some development activity with a team, you participated in a hackathon, and those things become the nuggets of value you've made along your path, it then allows us to validate.
So then that suggests that you don't, because I wanted to ask whether you think a degree in computer science or IT is even necessary in 2024 to pursue a career in software development. And what advice would you have for someone who's now weighing those options?
Right. When I think about software development, I think about some of the preliminaries you need to be aware of. You need to be really good at a language, some language. And that goodness is not expressed by your recall, but what you've done with it. You need to have techniques, which in my neck of the woods we'll call algorithms, algorithmic exposure. It's like maybe back when we were in secondary school, they had a friend next to you saying, when will we ever use Pythagoras' theorem? Sometimes when people are doing algorithms, they ask, when will I ever need to know how to write a merge sort by hand? When will I need to know Dijkstra's algorithm? Right? Those are two. I'm sorry for the audience who will be hearing this thinking, what is this man talking about?
No, that's exactly what we want to hear.
But software development is a thinking person's game. And the muscle of thinking needs to be developed.
I like that.
You must have a mind that has exercised itself in particular kinds of complexity. And so the question of degree or not used to kind of be more of a entering the door like HR seeing and saying, oh yes, this person has a degree.
Right.
People involved in hiring didn't know what else to use.
Is that a point at which you know someone is not a fit for development?
How do you mean?
In terms of, are you looking for that ability to think critically and to solve problems? Is that where you sort of separate sheep from goat?
Let me back away from that. I'm thinking about critical thinking as a cliche now.
Fine.
Simply because, I was around in UE when the Critical Thinking Institute was first launched. And that term has followed us in terms of people who work in the knowledge work area.
Right.
Critical thinking. You need to have critical thinking. It kind of feels like it's not capturing what we're trying to capture. You need to have an experience with wrestling with problems with your mind and coming up with solutions. And software gives us structured way for that. So just to get back to the thing you asked about degree or not, whatever program you're in, you have to confirm to yourself it will allow you to develop that mental strength.
Right.
Not mental strength like, oh, I can recall things, but I have experience with creating from first principles.
Okay, right. What's your take on self-learning or boot camps versus more structured programs like maybe a degree?
Right. So in software, I can only speak for software. All of software is self-learning. All of it is, if you're in a class and you're learning introduction to object-oriented development, and you have this notion that, oh, I have learned objects because I learned it in my class for 3 months, you're very mistaken. If you're in a boot camp where they tell you objects exist and you see it over the course of a week or two, even worse off in my mind. I think a degree gives you a little bit more time for deliberate exposure. Deliberate practice is a big thing in our field, and that term is an important term. It's not just putting the word deliberate and practice together. It's an ethos that says you spend time working on increasingly difficult things to the point where you have a familiarity with that area of difficulty.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset, exactly. And so I remember we had assignments when I was doing my BSc. I did my BSc at UE, and they were so horrible. An assignment would take me a week. And you had other courses. This one assignment, you're wrestling with, why is the compiler not working? Why is it not making any sense? You can get that anywhere. You can get that simply by trying to build projects on your own. And there are a number of places to do that. So much so, to come back to your question, if your goal is simply to become really proficient at software development, I would go so far as to say you can pull all the material together yourself and create your own program. And then at the end, build working software.
Right.
What things like degrees and boot camps do is they give you structured approaches to that with people you might want to trust.
Good. I don't want to come across like I'm picking on the degree too much, but I think it's something that we need to have that conversation locally.
Sure.
my son wants to pursue future in software development, and he's looked at the computer science degree at UE.
Yeah.
I noticed you did both the bachelor's and master's at UE.
Yeah, I did.
So I guess I want to know, looking back, what would you say the real value of your degrees at UE? What was the real value for you?
I am remembering for my bachelor's failing one course, I think 4 times. A course called Design and Analysis of Algorithms. It was taught by Dr. Kalitran. Why? We didn't like that man at all.
Good.
We didn't like him at all.
All right.
The thing about doing a degree at UE, the interaction with my lecturers, I value significantly. Some of my best lecturers I met, best people I know and talk to, I met there. I think there's a danger in thinking, oh, all I need is the actual knowledge. All I need is the words on the page or the words on the screen. That's sometimes you get an impression. I just need to Google and find a book and I'm good. But the people, I remember working with Dr. Bernard, my best course came from 2 reasons. I had taken what I had learned in the class and applied it to a very small project with some friends I met on campus. So I remember meeting some friends on campus, and one of the guys, Maurice, he pulled us into a work opportunity. He used to work with campus IT, and he said, hey, let's do this. I need somebody who could write Java really well. I put up my hand, even though I just learned Java 3 months before. And it allowed me to work there, which led me to working with Mr. Cowan, which led me back into my course with Dr. Bernard. Is that ecosystem of learning and experience that you get from a physical space where there is opportunity to kind of leverage the serendipity, which you don't really get by things that are more economically arranged.
What about soft skills? Do you learn any of that during your university experience?
I would hope you do. However, that one, some don't. And it really is based on what your learning process was. I remember one of my friends only kind of got to UE because her name was on the list and she didn't know. So she was going to migrate or something. And I said, hey, your name on the list. So I called her.
Right.
She said, hey, this is amazing. So she did the same degree I did while working along. We would just work next to each other and I realized her code didn't look like my code. I was able to tell her, no, you need to align this. To me, the idea of, now as it turns out, she had really good handwriting.
Good.
So there's 2 things that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
My code handwriting was really good. Her actual handwriting was really good. And I think of that with soft skills. I think it's that human interaction bit that there's no way you're going to get us on a course. We weren't in any groups together. It was just working along with another human, struggling towards figuring something out. I think it made for a good program for me.
In my experience and based on things I've read, I keep hearing about this importance of being able to collaborate with other people in a sort of real world environment.
Yeah.
And is that also something that is necessary at iGovTT and what's the value of collaboration in those environments?
So at iGov, we work from home.
Right.
For the most part, right? We do come out for meetings from time to time and for training. But you could find yourself not actually physically seeing a colleague for maybe a week or even a couple of weeks. One of the ways I've kind of mandated we address that, we have these in-person meetings at least once a month. We have regular team meetings throughout the week. But once a month, we turn up at the office and it's an update meeting. But it's a weird kind of update meeting because the point is not just to share information, it's to update each other on how we look, how we feel, how we're talking. There's that kind of, the update is more than the content of the meeting. Hopefully we got a chance to play some games. So we've played Halo a couple of times. We may play some card games, that kind of a stuff. The point is just, we're humans and humans need to see each other as a part of just existing. It's not enough to simply hear each other across a mic and Teams. Connection is important.
It's important.
And so facilitating that, having deliberate other team building exercises is important as well. And just knowing as a manager, your team needs to be aware of each other in the fullness of what that means beyond just the project we're working on.
I think that working remotely at a state enterprise, that's interesting to me. I don't know that other state enterprises, is that officially sanctioned at other state enterprises, or is that an iGov thing? Because I think remote work is sort of part and parcel of the life of a developer. Yeah. Was that part of the consideration for how this became policy at iGov?
Because that predates me, I don't know. I could tell you from what I've seen from observation, right? Because you're in IT, to some degree, as you said, remote work is, let's say a client has a problem, right? Like the problem now manifested, and they call and said, this thing is not working. And they're at their office in some other part of the country. Do you need to physically drive over to them to help them out? That doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't work. And so our world you have to have the practice of the art of remote working to know when you need to tell the person, turn the video on, share your screen. You need these resources. It just feels like it's a good practice that iGov, I think, benefits from a lot.
But are developers prioritizing the ability to work remotely? I follow that conversation in the US in particular following the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, there's a sort of major, people have threatened mutiny and everything else.
Right.
If they're not allowed to work. And I personally, because I work remotely, I think there's an impact on delivery. I prefer to work this way, not because, I just want to be home, but I this is where I am optimal in terms of delivering on projects, right? Are you all having that kind of conversation?
So, I mean, I think we're post that. I think we're in a place, and as a society, we've seen those conversations where at first, prior to the pandemic, remote work was almost a luxury. It just felt like in Trinidad and Trinidad and Tobago, you had to work for particular kind of companies who were enlightened.
Yeah.
The pandemic changed that. It showed it can happen. And now post-pandemic, you have this notion, let's return to the office in some cases, or I will never go back to an office. I think iGovTT has to sit in the middle simply because of who we're serving. Some of our customers are very remote work friendly. Our meetings with them are remote. We don't need to go to their office, nor them come to ours. And that has a lot of flexibility to it. But some of our customers, some of our clients prefer to do everything in person.
Yeah.
And so being able to support that, facilitate that is critical. You just have to know that the world is different. The world has different kinds of emphases. For developers in particular, there's benefits sometimes to being in a physical meeting with a whiteboard up and coming to one mind on something.
Right.
But oftentimes, just because of how we work, you might find you need a little space. You need to be in an environment like your home maybe, or some closed office where you have the ability to focus.
Right.
And you do that. And so it's, from my perspective, helping drive a team, I wouldn't put my foot down and say, you must come to the office or you must be here 3 times a week or what. No, I think we need to understand what the work is. Right. Because I've done a lot of that work myself. I remember I used to go into the office on a Sunday evening. I was a younger guy, didn't have too much other concerns. And I would have a good time, quiet office when there was no potential for someone to come knocking on my door and have a good go of it. And so I understand the need for developers sometimes to have maximal focus and to give it to them if you can.
So on your team, you're measuring results.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's go back to the early days. What did you gravitate to in school? Like, what were your favorite subjects?
Maths, science, physics. Well, favorite is a strange one because I did really well in IT. But as it turns out, even when we did IT in school, in secondary school, we couldn't do, there's 2 kinds of IT, or 3, I think, but forget the basic. They were general or technical. We couldn't do general because we didn't have time. And I really wanted to do that as programming. So we ended up doing the one that was like Microsoft Office and that kind of stuff. It remains one of the most poignant memories for me in secondary school because we had SBAs. I don't know if they still have SBAs. It's been a while. But our SBA submission, through some accidents of time, I went to school in Northeastern College in Sangre Grande. We had to be in school at 11 o'clock at night, a class of us submitting this thing over dial-up. For the young ones, dial-up was a form of internet that was close to torture. So we were trying to submit, and I just remember distinctly someone playing Bob Marley, very loud in the lab, how we were all working together. And I think that creates the idea of what it means to be creating an IT. You have this collaborative environment, it's free, you're listening to this music, and we're focused, you're helping each other out. I think I was finished maybe much earlier in the evening, but your friends weren't finished. Right. So we were together getting this thing done. That was cool for me.
So let's be real for a second. You know how everyone's talking about the importance of skills in today's job market? Well, they're not wrong. I don't have a degree, and honestly, I'm doing just fine because I understand skills are where it's at. In fact, I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal about Gen Z being the new toolkit generation. Young people taking jobs as plumbers and electricians and making serious money, no degree. That's why I'm excited about NESC Technical Institute. They've got a new intake happening right now, and it's all about learning real hands-on skills. Stuff like automotive services, drilling rig operations, welding, which is especially useful if you want to work in the energy sector, or train to be an electrician or an air-conditioned tech because those skills always pay. There are even courses in IT networking and industrial fabrication, so check them out because they've got a program for you. And now's the time. NESC Technical Institute could be your best path to a new career. Check out their programs and getting on the action. Head over to nesc.edu.tt.
That's nesc.edu.tt and see what's up, and maybe even apply for their new intake.
Did you have mentors? Like, what key experiences or mentors influenced your journey into software development, if you were to look back?
I mean, I have mentors today, but back then, I think certainly Adam West on Batman was a starting point. Batcave and Batmobile. When I went to my uncle's house and he had a Miss Pac-Man playing on some computer, I was like, what is this? This is a computer, this is a game. And he knew that from watching TV, but I was kind of surprised that, well, look at this. This is in his house. I think that set me up. That had me going, I'm going to be a programmer, without even knowing what I meant, what that meant when I said it. And it continued from there, really. I had this affinity for Revenge of the Nerds and all things computer. These are references that I don't think much of your audience might get, but...
You might be surprised, but yeah, I hear you. What you're speaking to is what I think other people who've come on the show have said. Sometimes it's just sort of early connections that you make to something you saw or something you looked at or something, and then an entire career could be spawned from
exactly.
that.
I would say yes and no in that I also said I wanted to be a lawyer at one point and an architect and a carpenter and maybe a fireman. I've said that many times, but one of the things I realized with software development is it kind of gave me, if you look at the professions I would have named, various aspects of them can find expression in software development. For law, it was advocacy, and you have to advocate for your solutions.
Right.
For architecture and carpentry, it's building, its shapes, its design patterns. And if you know me, I talk about design patterns all the time. I think I found a way to exercise myself in those spaces in this profession.
Right. What is it about software development that has made you commit for so long?
Well, I heard some examples of other fields, like even law, where you can make a lot of money in a surprising way. So, for example, anyway, I wouldn't come to that, but it was funny to realize that professions like that are still able to attract a lot of money in terms of career and business. But I remain convinced that in software, if you think about it, you build a software asset, right? And let's say a software business, you build it once and you can sell that ad infinitum. That idea to me, I've seen a little bit of it over the course of my career. That's an amazing thing. You build your business on the basis of digital artifacts that don't need to be recreated every time. There's something there. And I haven't fully seen it yet, but I've seen enough to know, keep going, you'll find it.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because I get a sense that, and people maybe think that Trinidad has not been the place where you have a bunch of these apps being built and people aren't optimizing by building apps that they can make lots of money from over time, like in other places. So you're in the business. What do you make of the state of software development in Trinidad and Tobago? Sort of taking a 10,000-foot sort of view of the industry.
Maybe I can start with a slightly negative example and I'll build from there.
Sure.
A friend told me a number of people leave the industry after a while. So let's look at how you start. Classically, you go to get a degree, you come out with a degree, and then you go to look for a job. And because you might know where to look, you end up in IT. So you're a software engineer. You have to, in your heart, you're a software engineer, but you're working in IT somewhere else. You spend a few years stuck there, and then eventually kind of realize, no, I should have done finance. Or I should have done something more classic, more traditional. And you can't make the transition, so you do. Or you transition into management. So you leave the actual craft of software engineering because you haven't figured out really where to go. And it's not loudly being announced where to go. But you have that thing in your heart and it stays there for a long time. I feel that happens to a lot of people. Go ahead.
No, because I was about to say, you're kind of describing what I think is the state of affairs in Trinidad, which is that from one angle, it looks like in your heart, you're a software developer, but you end up in IT. From another angle, it looks like Trinidad has not prepared the landscape for software developers to emerge and to thrive and to stay and build careers, right? Because the landscape is missing. So I tend to think that we've missed that part of the conversation, right? That Trinidad has not put the thing in place that would allow software development as a profession to really thrive.
And yet, we have software companies here. We have Telios, Davin, RioMed, HR Plus. Like if you did the search, are there software companies in Trinidad? Yes, there are. And a number of them have been around for a while, like 10, 15 years even. Not a lot, but they've been around. So the question is, so starting with that person who may have missed it, there's a notion of, I graduated my degree in software engineering. A lot of people need IT skill. You need IT resource. And that pulls you a little bit. You get pulled into maybe a financial institution or some other firm where they need IT resource and you need a job. If you didn't do that search, you didn't establish that link into one of those companies, or they weren't hiring or whatever, you might find yourself just out of school with no real capacity to convince anyone to hire you except someone in an IT department. That's one way to get pulled into I would call it, for the purposes of software engineering, the wrong stream. You got pulled into IT support in some department. It's perfectly fine to do it, but how do you jump into that next stream? I would say, for example, some of the earlier questions you asked about that portfolio building, about setting up yourself, about knowing what you're going after deliberately, then means if you jump into one of those software firms, you might find a deeper sense of understanding of what it means to build a career in software engineering. We had to get into one of those firms to start.
I hear you. I hear that argument. I still feel like the profession has a brand problem.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because I've seen exactly what you're describing, right? Lots of potentially great developers end up in networking and doing networking and
Right.
IT and all of that, right? And fixing cables and getting the internet back up and fixing your Outlook.
Yes.
But it's because I think there's a brand imaging issue. How many people know about some of these software companies? So I guess I want to find out, how do we repair that brand problem?
I think I agree with you. From a national perspective even, we don't really have a grasp on where's the real success with software.
Correct.
Now, if you think about it, we kind of establishing lanes. There's the lane of, you get pulled into the IT support lane, or you get pulled into an existing company lane. There's the other lane of, you find yourself attracting the attention of a company in the States or in Canada or whatever, North America, either because you're really good at the undergrad experience and you were able to qualify for one of their interviews. Now, North America is not just your Google and your Microsoft and your Netflix. Those companies do hire. And in fact, because the relationships that diaspora resources have in those companies, they sometimes present themselves to local universities. Another reason why universities kind of make sense as well, just because they're making the alignment work out. So you have the potential to work for one of those companies, but that's not the only one. There are many other smaller companies whose names you wouldn't know,
right,
who are looking for
wide
engineers.
spectrum of opportunities.
Exactly. So for you in software, you start off, let's say you jump into that pool, and so you're at the place of competing really with the world, but you're competing for the North American pie. That is another way to get in. Now, to come back to your branding thing, many people don't know about any of those ways. There's a fourth way, and I think the fourth way is the biggest one related to branding, which is, as much as you have these software companies and you have these international companies, you also have build your own company. You also have understanding what you really have as a software engineer. If you graduate with a degree in software engineering or software development, or even electrical engineering, if you graduate with the capacity to build software, what it means is you on your own could begin to understand how to solve people's real problems for which software is an answer. You on your own. Now, it doesn't make sense to be on your own. It's good to go to a brethren, go to a sister, go to a partner. But the fact is, there are people who have car repair shops who don't have software supporting them. And you could build that software. There are people who have barber shops who don't know how to connect the account management system they have to the payment system, to the notification system. And you could build that one workflow.
It sounds like you're making a case for software developers having a natural affinity to working for themselves and self-employment and selling their wares in the market where opportunities.
I think that affinity can be learned.
Yeah.
But to your point on branding, I don't think the problem is a branding problem, really. I think it's a tasking problem. We don't task ourselves with the understanding of what we're getting and what we're getting into. If you tell yourself, all I'm learning to be is a bright guy in software, then I'm going to be really good at software and not good at identifying problems.
Let me ask it another way. What responsibility does the employer have? Because it sounds like you're sort of putting a lot of it on the individual.
Sure.
To me, the responsibility falls to the employer and employers as a collective to, how many jobs are you seeing advertised for software developers, especially pre-pandemic, right? How many success stories do we know software developer success stories where
Right.
for a profession, for a career that is sort of high profile in other parts of the world, software development feels rather muted in Trinidad. What do you make of that?
That's a really good point. And let me lean into the employers a little bit to go down the road you're suggesting. It's a good point because employers often take another option to get their needs fulfilled in terms of software. Either they go off the shelf or they go with solutions that not quite going to work off the shelf, but can be customized coming from other markets, North America or India or anywhere else really.
Right.
And so I know of companies locally, startups that have preferred to go with the Southeast Asian side of things, India or one of them,
right,
to build the actual software or to customize what they've purchased. What that means from a landscape perspective is me coming out of school who have enough skill, me who may have spent 5 years, I haven't spent 5 years building what you specifically need, and you not interested really in waiting on me to level up. So to the company side of things, they don't necessarily understand how to speak to the local software market in a way that makes sense for them, because it could get their needs filled as far as they see more quickly with other approaches. Maybe you're right. Maybe branding isn't it. I think it's maybe communication. How do I as a business communicate with the local market of software engineers to get them to build for my needs?
Right.
Can I just speak to one thing I think that's
for sure.
pointed to that?
Yeah.
When I orient it like that, it actually makes me think about something the Ministry of Digital Transformation has done. So I've done hackathons for many years. When I worked at Telios Systems, I strongly drove the Telios Code Jam.
What's a hackathon?
It's an event. Can be one day, can be a weekend, can be a few weeks, where software developers are invited to solve problems in a particular set of areas. Most likely using some set of tools, maybe websites or using packages or using data. And then the results of which can either lead to commercial opportunities or simply be celebrated because they're really good ideas, good implementations. So I've been inside of those things for a number of years, driving it, helping it work. Businesses could use that as well. In fact, in one of the runnings of Telios Code Jam, we partnered with CARDI, as the Caribbean Agricultural Research Development Institute, and they used a Microsoft HoloLens for augmented reality solution. There's amazing solutions coming out of that. HackTT was done by iGovTT, and it facilitated the discovery of what became Employee TT and e-appointment. Those two applications that run today in production. But what I thought about was DHub. So the Ministry of Digital Transformation has this thing called DHub. And what they've created, and they announced it recently, DHub is a community that has 1,000 local developers registered on it. And over the last year, they were able to find 5 teams of developers who are currently working on 5 MVPs for ministries who express their needs in that context. If we limit DHub to simply being what those ministries needed or what the ministry needs, we won't really see what they've done. They've created the place where communication can happen a little bit more easily between those who have needs and our developer community. Prior to DHub, if you told someone you could find 1,000 developers in Trinidad, they might have laughed at you.
Yeah, I might have been among those people because it really does feel fairly muted and sort of in the background. It's not Silicon Valley. And if we do have 1,000 developers, no one has seen it fit to create our own Silicon Valley. Right. In light of that, and I'm saying in light of the what I call a brand problem or that industry perception of software developers not having a particular lane locally, in light of that, along with the advent of generative AI, should someone consider a career in software development in Trinidad?
We shouldn't worry too much about generative AI in the context of software development. Now, in other knowledge work areas, yes. But Gen AI as it is right now, I don't want to make bets about the future. If you had made a bet about GPT at version 3, it would have been wrong by the time ChatGPT came out. So Gen AI is a big deal. We understand what it's going to do, what it's doing right now. But right now, anybody who's saying, I don't need software developers because Gen AI is around, they're really missing what Gen AI actually is. It's a great tool. It's a great leg up. But you need people who understand, who truly understand what the human is saying to them across the table. Gen AI doesn't understand that. ChatGPT doesn't understand. It is able to find the next word that sounds good. But when you really want a system and you want to prove the system works, You need other tools on top of that to verify and validate and always work. You don't want something to decay after a while or to be at the mercy of the changes of the model around it. You really want that for software developers who are using tools like ChatGPT to give you much better experiences. The ability to talk to your programs is a big deal. We kind of thought we had it with Alexa and Siri, but that wasn't quite it. Now you can kick off entire processes. Processes can speak to you and tell you, oh, I finished this. But not for 1 second does that mean you don't need core programming behind it to ensure that what the process is doing is within the box it's supposed to be operating inside of.
So you're saying that at no point are you prepared to discourage anyone from pursuing software development in 2024?
I think the opposite is very true, to be honest. I saw Jensen Huang. Jensen Huang is CEO of NVIDIA, one of the most valuable companies in the planet today, with $3 trillion market cap. We know who he is.
I think they just became the most valuable company on the planet.
There you go. He said, in the future, we will all be programmers. People are kind of hearing that, like, in the future, you won't need someone who's skilled in programming. But to be clear, that muscle, the muscular experience of solving problems, thinking your way through to solutions, will still be something that there are few of us who can do than more. Even though many of us could kick off a program and could start a program and give you a front end, it's not the entirety of a software solution. And that's where software developers come in. End-to-end software solutions. You'll need that skill for some time to come.
If it were your own son that you're talking to, how would you counsel him if he came to you and wanted to pursue a career in software development? What would you tell him today that might be different from your own path a few years ago?
There's a very specific thing we used to tell developers just when they were learning programming. Back when I was learning, let's say 2004, 2003, you use Notepad. Most of us ignore Notepad in the computer. We go to Word or whatever else. When you're writing code, you can write code with any number of tools, and some of the tools would have helped you along the process. So we would have told developers, use Notepad. Forget the tools. Today, I wouldn't do that. If my son wanted to explore programming, I might sit with him and say, listen, you need to understand the fundamentals. Here's how you understand the fundamentals. These are the books. These are the writings. But here's the AI that once you have a sense of the fundamentals, the conversation between you and the AI is in the context of those fundamentals. If you don't know the fundamentals, Gen AI will not lead you in the right direction by itself. But once you have an appreciation for it, once your sense of the craft is in place, then now when you talk to Gen AI, when you say, let's build a solution together, there is this virtuous interaction that can give you real speed. There's a lot of conversation today. If you look around in parts of the internet, don't hire junior developers anymore. Gen AI is like a junior developer. That's incredibly wrong. For where Gen AI is, even though it can write code more quickly and give you useful code, for where it is, that code may be wrong. The code may be troublesome to figure out that it's wrong and therefore lead you to problems later on. For a junior developer, the faster you can help a junior developer leg up, even if they're using Gen AI, the faster they can give you more and more value at an outsized pace.
So that's interesting because I suppose the rest of us we see generative AI as output.
Yes.
You're saying generative AI could form part of the set of tools that can upskill a developer.
Certainly.
It can form part of your training.
Certainly.
So you're making a case for using Gen AI in that way, even at the nascent stage in your career, when you're now starting.
Especially if you can design the Gen AI experience. So ChatGPT is not the only way to think about Gen AI. You can have Gen AI overlaid in a traditional learning experience.
Oh.
You can have Gen AI in the examination. So if you think about CXC and past papers,
right?
And I think I actually saw someone build a chat CXC, and I think they got in trouble for it. But the idea makes a lot of sense. You can have 10 past papers, which you get really good at, or you can have 10 past papers that you give to Gen AI, who gives you 100 past papers and allows you to practice for a much longer period of time.
I see what you mean. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it's certainly not, it's not the end of all things, but it shouldn't be ignored. I would never advocate for ignoring it.
You've been out here for a while, and I'm certain that you've encountered developers from outside of Trinidad.
Yes.
Do we have top-notch developers in Trinidad?
Some of our developers, as I said, work for Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA.
Local guys?
Yeah, guys from Trinidad. So when I say all developers, I mean people who I know from Trinidad. They work at the highest levels of some of the best companies on the planet. And many of us, I think we know this and we forget it. Trinidad and Tobago citizens have a way of excelling anywhere you put them in the planet.
Yes.
And so, we recently celebrated one of us launching up into space. So when you hear those stories, I think we get accustomed to hearing our parents tell us these stories and ignoring them, thinking they're just trying to gas us up. They're just trying to encourage us to not watch TV for a moment longer. But it is true. And sometimes we miss that fact. We miss how the kind of luminaries we've created. And we kind of find ourselves stuck looking around thinking, well, what good could come from this place? The answer is a lot. But
Right.
you have to do the research yourself sometimes.
What do you make of this push toward digital transformation and e-government and all of the things that I suppose fall under the Ministry of Digital Transformation? What do you make of all of that in the context of software development talent? And do we have the right skills to get us to that endpoint?
I think the critical skill you need is a desire for the most appropriate skill. The skill is not what you know at some particular point. I growing up, there's a show I used to watch called Doogie Howser, right? He was this young doctor who knew the answers. It was like,
I know it. Yep.
so in my mind, that caused me to kind of think intelligence, brightness, what we call brightness in Trinidad, which turned out to be a lot of recall, was the most important skill. But I think the most important skill is learning new things. And once you're oriented to learn new things, it allows you to take advantage of all the changes taking place around you. It's that old survival of the fittest, where fitness is not physical fitness in terms of strength. It's how you fit with the surroundings around you, the changing environment. And I think that applies in software as well as anything else. And digital transformation can enable you to increase your fitness for the age. If every business needs to have a customer service experience that is supported by AI, and you don't even have a digital customer service experience, how can you participate in that? It's that ability to plug into the world at the speed of the world, as opposed to hoping the world comes down to your speed.
I want to apply that to your own career. How do you stay current?
Right.
In a career and in a field that is changing like every 5 minutes, how are you staying current?
It's funny, you make me think about a phrase I've been taught: breathe in 20 years, breathe out 20 years, which I know is a bit ironic to what you've just asked. But I'm saying it because I stay current because I am current. I am current. My needs and solving my needs is not irrelevant. Solving my needs by using the best tool today helps me to stay current. So it's not that I'm trying to see the latest technology. Whatever needs I have most likely can be solved by technology either I create or has been created in better ways to solve the problems of today.
But that sounds like you're a reader. It sounds like you are adept at research.
I read a lot.
It sounds like you're connected. Are you using social media and sort of staying connected to
Sure.
other people in the space?
So let me think about that in a few practical dimensions.
Sure.
I'm on X, Twitter, a lot. It's kind of like to grab a sense of what's going on. Like you can't know everything, but you could be aware of things changing around you.
I like that.
I think when I heard about ChatGPT, it may have been when Sam Altman announced it on X and somebody I'm following reshared it. So it's not just being on Twitter, it's about who you follow on Twitter. I think in Trinidad and Tobago, LinkedIn has become very popular with professionals. So it's a kind of a good way to see what's going on. But it's still a bit not my cup of tea. It's a bit too much pageantry. I'm not really looking for pageantry.
Right.
But the third thing I'd add is I see it important to tell your story, to share what's going on. And I think you pointed out a branding issue with the industry. Not enough of us are trying to do that. And I don't just mean sharing a story on LinkedIn. I mean writing a blog post or recording a video or talking about your process. And I have found trying to explain myself in a way that I'm not embarrassed by is a way of ensuring I'm remaining current to those who are listening to that thing.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to match what they're hearing, communicate in a way that makes sense today, which means using the words of today, the approaches of today. And that helps a lot. So those three things, using social, but also telling a story and being deliberate about it, while having, as it turns out, a long-term view, is extremely important.
That's good.
Because if you did not do long-term view, I would add, you'd be pulled by every new thing you see. And that actually turns out doesn't allow you to be grounded enough.
Counterproductive.
Yeah, it turns out to be counterproductive.
Yeah. Help me understand the career path for a software developer in Trinidad. Where do you start and what's the progression like?
I would say if you could work for a local software company, try hard. However, all companies are not made equal, and it may be frustrating. It might be a good experience to work for someone else. It's a nice place to start to see what happens when someone writes code and ends up in production, to see it for real. Because when you're in school, you don't really see that. You can write code and the code could work. So there's a difference between you writing code that compiles, and I know you're using language that may be strange to some, but essentially writing code that works and writing code that works in production, meaning someone has paid for it.
Right.
So once you see that process, someone has paid for it, it should be, your learning never stops really, but especially as someone who just graduated, you've learned how to write code, you haven't learned how to build useful products yet. And so how do you understand that process? Once you do, there are a number of things open to you. You could stay with whatever company you're at. You could look for other companies to get a diverse set of experiences. If you weren't fortunate enough to land a role at any of the local software companies, then there are foreign software companies. You want to find a role in one of those. If not, and you need a job, there is nothing wrong with working in any IT organization. You don't want to not be in IT. In other words, certainly you're good at software. You don't want to be working in somebody's HR department or somebody's communications department unless you are working on their website. And I'm being deliberate about that because you need to actually be in a space where IT skills are being exercised. If you land in someone's IT environment, it's still very useful to understand how people use IT, how it benefits them, why they're asking for it. And then you see the gaps. I would say for someone starting their career in software, it's critical you have an entrepreneurial mind. And some of us, we don't start with that, but you can learn it. And once you're willing to learn it, then how do you apply that? Typically by identifying problems and going ahead and trying to solve it, either with yourself or with a team.
And I suppose the $1 million question, what is the money like? Help me understand what software developers make in Trinidad in the context of some of the local software firms. What do you know about salary and compensation?
That's a really broad question. And it's broad both for industry. In other words, a software engineer in an oil company in Trinidad. And they may not be proper software. I shouldn't say proper. They may not be software engineers in Trinidad in oil companies. They may be data scientists. They may be specialized roles that use software skills. They'll make whatever. They'll make multiples of whatever else everyone else is making in the industry.
Sure.
Nevertheless, if you're just out of school, you make like a $10,000 a month, $11,000. When you spend a little bit more time, you might make like $15,000, $16,000.
Right.
If you're a senior, 20-something thousand. These are general averaged kinds of figures. They will change based on industry, for example, banking or finance, and they may change based on role. Sometimes someone has a software engineer as a role, but the person is involved in support, they're involved in customer acquisition, they go out to meetings to meet potential stakeholders and clients. So it's not so simple. And as an expert, that causes the industry to feel weird. It's like, what am I? Am I a programmer or am I a consultant talking to the customer? Am I involved in help desk? And am I on support 24/7? And sometimes you're all of those things in our local industry. This is answering from a local perspective.
Sure.
But if you are a software engineer in Trinidad and Tobago, I can't leave out that you could be working for a company in North America. That's an easy place to think about. You could work for anywhere really. But I've noticed North American firms seem to like our engineers. We're near shore, we speak the language, we understand the culture, and we're bright.
Same time zone, yeah.
And if that's the case, then everything I said about salary changes. You may start at, I don't want to be too horrible, you may start at 30, but they may demand particular kind of availability and the previous experience. Typically, that's for like senior engineers.
And that's something you're seeing more and more of, local engineers who are set on finding an opportunity with a foreign firm?
Well, people are aware of it and the awareness is increasing. I'm not going to pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's attractive. I think there are risks to it, not the least of it being what we see with layoffs happening on that side. Layoffs seem to be happening for big companies very frequently, every 3 months kind of a thing.
Sure.
So if you start last at a company like that, you may find yourself first to be asked to take a little break. You are not really connected to the delivery of the solution and the environment is being delivered. So it's not that beneficial for you in the long term. It looks good. You may make top of all local ranges, but there's another way to think about it. When I mentioned this idea about software entrepreneurship and software business, That's a big deal.
Yeah.
If you deliver those needs frequently enough, you can find yourself going way beyond what we're talking about in terms of salary and building profitable companies. And I think that can outpace even the remote work contingent.
Do you anticipate a need for more developers, say at iGov and outside of iGov across industry?
Well, certainly we need more in iGov. I can tell you that for sure. And how that works itself out is us having to tell customer, we can't give you that right now. We could give it in 2 months, 3 months. iGov is, relatively speaking, a small firm in terms of software. 8 engineers might feel like a lot, or 10 or 13 for my team locally, because there aren't a lot of local software firms that are trying to do that with that size. But internationally, software teams number in the hundreds.
Yeah.
If you can say, for example, DHub just has 1,000 developers on it, then eventually you can run out of that if they're allocated appropriately. And I would love if they are allocated appropriately, if ministries grab onto them and private businesses use them to build out their solutions and engage in digital transformation.
And what's the range of salary at iGov for developers in terms of like, where does it sort of...
I have seen, because I haven't tracked it properly, I'm still getting familiar with it. I have seen high teens to mid-20s kind of a thing.
Right.
I also shouldn't hold myself too close to it, lest iGov calls me tomorrow and said, what are you doing talking about our salaries in such detail?
State enterprise. This is all public information.
Sure, but I've seen high teens to mid-20s really. Now, that's not just for the engineer role, but maybe for as well managers and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, so it's middle of those areas, I would say.
Any closing thoughts on this fascinating career? I still think it's a fascinating career, and software is building the world that we live in. Any closing thoughts for us?
As I mentioned cybersecurity a little while ago, I want to come back to that.
Yeah, sure.
When we announced this launch for this management system, the Cybersecurity Investment Tax Allowance, one of the remarks that was made by the minister himself on the launch was he kind of hopes that people realize this is the beginning of an industry. By the government saying you have an allowance of this amount, $500,000 per business,
yes,
then it means if you offer cybersecurity services, then your business may grow. The businesses you're supporting may rely on you more and more, and it can be a door to other things.
Yes.
There's a way we need to see the changes happening. And if we see it correctly, the opportunities are like ripe fruit on the ground.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, he had mentioned that, I think, in one of the budget presentations.
The allowance was announced last year.
Yeah,
in the budget, yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of closing words, I would hope that all our engineers, our software engineers, our budding engineers understand the opportunities around them, that they see through the noise, that they're not worried too much about Gen AI, and instead find ways to exercise themselves.
And that they're paying attention.
Pay attention, definitely.
That's a good place to leave it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Irwin.
Thanks for having me, man.
Where can people follow you online? You mentioned X, is that?
Sure, I'm on, this might sound very iPhone-y, but on X I'm at iStar with 2 R's, ISTARR. And you can find me other places as well. I have a website, but it's updated infrequently.
Right.
IrwinWilliams.com.
Thank you, Irwin.
Thanks, man.
Good to have you.
Cheers.
All right, that's our show today. Shortlisted is hosted and produced by me, Kerry Peters, and mixed and edited by Ross Burns. If you found this episode useful, please share it with your colleagues and invite them to subscribe to our newsletter at shortlister.co. That's shortlisthr.co. I guarantee it's the one email you want to read if you work in corporate. So sign up now, and don't forget to also rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh, and I want to ask you to support our journalism by reaching out with information you think might be valuable to our audience. We're back soon with another episode.